University, and HR University would like to welcome Sarah Charton for today's episode of HR Stories. Sarah, welcome. Good evening.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. Thank you. Good evening.
Yes, yes. So Sarah, wanted to invite you to our HR Stories and get to know a little bit more about your background. We certainly have observed that you have worked in various industries. Just talk to us from the beginning,
True.
a little bit about your career journey and background.
It's been an interesting trip. Um, if you've seen my LinkedIn, you could see that I graduated from Pratt Institute. Pratt Institute does not have a liberal arts school at all. I majored in illustration and communications design. And as it happened, right when I graduated, the industry took a turn towards computer generated, which should sound a little familiar right about now. At that time, it was computer generated graphics. That is not how I work. I do more like line drawings. I mean, I can't, there are some here that I can't show you because they're not safe for work.
Okay.
Because I really enjoy drawing from the figure, like drawing from models, and quite frequently they are not wearing clothes. So short stop, okay, I'm not going to be an illustrator because evidently nobody wants to buy drawings. And I segued into management. I started off with an admin job that led to a job in a law firm.
Okay.
And so I moved into management, and kind of natural progression was towards human resources. It's not unusual for law firm managers. I'm fighting with an animal here, pardon me.
No worries.
It's not unusual for human resources to be one of the things that a law firm administrator does. I mean, there's various different, a whole lot of law firm administrators, that's the general manager of a law firm, are finance. I know of one who is IT, and a fair number who absorb human resources, which I found extremely interesting. So
got it.
I stuck with it.
So for our audience, and you're not the first person that has, shared that with me, kind of, so you were at Pratt Institute, and how do you kind of gravitated to the, people aspect? Was it kind of the ability to be creative, kind of a servant leader? Just talk a little bit more about that.
I guess probably more servant leadership, because that is something that resonates for me. I mean, human resources handles a bunch of things, and I feel like some of the major things are compliance and doing all the right things and not doing the wrong things, and doing your best to guide the organization towards the right things as much as you can. But servant leadership, I feel like, is really a big piece of it, because a lot of what we're there to do is to work with the people.
Right.
Pardon me.
No worries.
Wellington. That is a big piece. And it sort of comes in various places. Labor relations, as it happens, the place where I work has a union workforce. I mean, most of the employees are. There's benefits, which is huge, and getting even bigger every day and getting more complicated. So, I mean, I feel like the biggest driver for me, I think, was really servant leadership. Okay. It's not so much to help people. You're not going into this to be a social worker. That is not how it functions. But yeah, I mean, that's a lot of the role, to try and make things work and make all of the people that are involved in your organization as productive as they can be.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Can you talk to us a little bit about your first role in HR? Was it more, employee relations or benefits or HRIS, or, there's so many words, so many phrases, or personnel management, back in the day.
Sure. Back in the day, I guess I'd have to say primarily employee relations, benefits. You could say personnel. I mean, I think I probably just barely missed personnel. I'm not sure how long ago that was, but it was a while. I mean, I got into law firms when suits were still required, when people could still smoke in the office. I had partners that smoked cigars.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you just dovetail into my next question, I guess.
Okay.
I was being an HR practitioner today. compared to yesteryear, whether it's kind of office culture, kind of social, economic, technology. Kind of talk a little bit about that.
I would say, well, aside from technology, which has blown up, and I am a tech geek, so I really enjoy it. We'll get to that later. It's more employee forward than it was. I mean, you have to realize that particularly, I would say, for example, a law firm tends to be a vertically integrated organization as opposed to a horizontal, like, say, a Google.
Sure.
Law firms certainly at that time did not operate in, I mean, these were the senior partners, and then there were the junior partners, then there were senior associates, junior associates, so forth, with paralegals down to legal assistants or secretaries, file room. But it was like here up at the top, these are the senior partners, and they make the rules, and everybody is, at pains to make them happy and do whatever it is they want. Much less employee forward than now. Think about it. I have a daughter. She is 34. That means she was born in 1989. 1989 was 4 years before the Family Medical Leave Act ever existed. Yes. So imagine this. Imagine working for a law firm, having a child about the same time that some of the partners' wives were having children. We were all, roughly due close together. And they were on me like you have no idea. Why could I not come back to work in 4 weeks or 6 weeks? Would we say this to someone becoming a parent today? Absolutely not. Right. We have the Family Medical Leave Act. We have New York State paid family leave. Right. I mean, because New York is one of the states that offers such a benefit. And that is a statutory benefit, fellows. Didn't exist. They couldn't have fired me. They would have been within their rights to fire me. I couldn't have stopped them. That is not how it is now. And that's the kind of thing that I point to and say, you cannot imagine what a huge difference that is. That you could actually take up to 12 weeks off for the birth or adoption of a child and not lose your job and be able to keep your benefits, and you only have to pay what you would have paid out of your paycheck. You don't have to pay like what COBRA would cost you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You talk. I think that's a great kind of historical piece in terms of as a frame of reference. Kind of for our audience, can you talk a little bit about kind of how you quote unquote stay current, or kind of upskill? Do you go to conferences? Do you network? Kind of talk a little bit about that.
I have not been going to conferences. COVID really put a lid on things. I mean, not so interested in travel. And it's also easier to be online with people and with organizations. I do keep up with law firms that I know and, have maybe, have colleagues who've worked with who offer reasonably robust webinars and programs. I mean, Littler Mendelsohn, whom we also use at my office, does great programs, and they had an amazing series like First Fridays during COVID, which covered all kinds of ground. That some of it had to do with things that were being brought about by COVID, and others were just more general employment questions. And they cover benefits, labor, like everything you can imagine. Nixon Peabody is another firm that does really great, robust programs. Publications, and depends what. I really, really like the London Economist because it's for me at least, it's a more dispassionate, more removed point of view. The perspective is not partisan.
Noted.
Because it's outside of this country, so that kind of politics is not involved. And I feel like, okay, good. I feel like that's giving me more of an even-handed, like, okay, this is what this might mean, in the wider world. And they have great articles on science, on international relations, and those are things that I feel like also make a difference. I mean, just the weirdest stuff that comes across that you're like, I could see how that might actually, I was reading an article today, actually, that came up on LinkedIn that said millennials are stepping back from management. They don't want to do this. And I thought, well, I don't blame them because management is hard. But that then raises questions about, okay, well then who's going to? I mean, this ties into the layoffs that we've been seeing from Google, from from big tech, from companies like Macy's that have just like huge numbers of people, and most of those people tend to be a little more senior because they're more expensive. But that means that now more millennials are being thrust forward into management roles where they have to not only do their jobs but manage people, and a lot of them don't necessarily have any experience or training that would help them to do that, which means now, okay, hello, hey, HR, would you mind stepping up to the plate here? Because here's all these newly minted managers who now have to deal. I can understand that they're reluctant and they're not thrilled with this setup. And we're going to have to really step in.
So great segue to the next question I had, right? So I think you have unique perspective just with the amount of years you've been in this industry. Talk a little bit about mentorship, kind of anyone particular or a group of people that may have guided you to management, kind of some of the words of wisdom.
There were a few. I will say that being in the legal industry meant that I became a member of the Association of Legal Administrators, which is a fantastic group. I also joined SHRM, local and national, also an amazing group. And this is where you find your people. These are where your folks are going to be. You'll find people that are living what you're living, and you can ask them questions, you can make friendships, and they can help guide you. And those were two organizations that were huge for me in terms of helping me to understand what I was doing and how what I did fit into the larger goals for the organization, and provided mentoring, which I don't know if I could have found otherwise, and helped and gave me the opportunity to mentor other people.
It's great. It's great.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit more about kind of your current role. Just talk a little bit more about your line of sight in the centers of excellence. So, I'm an HR geek myself, right? So you talk about whether it's compensation, benefits, HRIS, E&I, employee relations, labor relations, or some of us are specialists or some of us are generalists, right? Just depending on the organization. Just talk a little bit more about that.
I guess for me, it's mostly benefits. That's probably what I'm strongest in, that and to some degree compliance. Because I'm working in this current environment where there is a labor workforce, I've been dealing with that. Although here's a dirty confession, I unionized a workforce.
Okay.
I did. Because it meant better benefits for the employees, and which is why anybody unionizes. But
so let's talk a little bit about benefits and total reward. There's another term for benefits. So kind of in this total reward space, there is so much variety and desire for different types of benefits. I think come to mind, hybrid work arrangements, pet insurance.
Yes.
What have you, in the benefit space, what have you seen as kind of desirable offerings?
Well, I can say that I added pet insurance, as a matter of fact, for my current employer, because I'm looking for things that could set us apart. And that's really what you want to be doing with benefits. I mean, in my opinion, you shouldn't just be doing the bare minimum that everybody's doing. You need something that people would say, okay, I have 3 offers and they're all relatively similar. Which one of these has something that I don't see at the others? So I said, okay, let's look at that. I have a proposal that I'm putting together for my employers that this is going to be interesting because the mindset has been firmly opposed to any suggestion of hybrid work at all. I first got introduced to hybrid work about when a whole lot of other New Yorkers did. For those of us in the crowd who are from New York City who may remember Hurricane Sandy.
I'm a New Yorker.
Remember that? 2012?
2012, yep.
Yeah. Well, the law firm where I was working was downtown, about equal distance between South Street Seaport and Ground Zero, World Trade. The building was shut down for 2 months because the basement flooded, which meant we couldn't work there and we had to set up elsewhere. And that was when the partners of the firm discovered oh, we don't have to have all the employees in one place all the time. No, as a matter of fact, you don't. How about that? And they then also discovered they could save about $5 million over the life of a commercial lease by giving up one floor because they had multiple floors in the building.
Mm.
And employers in New York City figured that out and realized, huh, so we don't have to have all this space and we could save a bunch of money. Yes, sir, you sure could. And that was when they started waking up to the idea of, maybe we should think about this whole hybrid thing. And I was like, maybe you should. Meanwhile, now I'm in real estate and this company management firmly opposed. I am waiting to see if there's going to be a change in that because we've got some things going on. I would strongly recommend it. And the reason that I recommend it is that now that everybody lived it and a whole lot of technology has come up around this concept and supports it, it's very difficult to put the genie back in the bottle. And multiple studies have shown that employees will take a pay cut in exchange for a hybrid schedule. That is how much time is worth to them. And when you think about this and you realize, okay, well, everybody has a life outside of work, about that. And that includes things like kids that have PTA meetings and have school assemblies and that kind of stuff. And you have the place where you live where your landlord may need to come in with the plumbers, or you own your home and you need the plumbers, and you need that flexibility. You need to go to a doctor. It's very tough now to find doctors with late hours, like late evening, late afternoon or evening or weekend hours. There has to be a way to manage this. And when you add on top of this that if we are talking about the employee workforce having to live someplace that's workforce adjacent, those kind of neighborhoods tend to be expensive because they're conveniently located. That is a tough ask, especially when we're talking about, we're not looking to attract boomers who have, as a class, very little student loan debt as a group, as opposed to millennials or Gen Z who are to their hairline in student debt. So for them to be able to afford a home that's closer to the workplace is a whole lot tougher than for boomers. I mean, it's a much heavier lift. And you know what? Employers who are forward thinking, I feel, are realizing this and saying, we have to find a way to balance these things. Some industries, like legal, figured that out a while ago and realized they could move their back office operations to places where the standard of living is different, where the cost of living is lower. So they could move back office to Texas, where rent is cheaper than New York City, because rent is cheaper almost everywhere on the planet than in New York City. Let's be real. I mean, we're up there with, I forgot who we're tied with now. I don't remember if it's Geneva or if it's Singapore in terms of how expensive New York is. Yeah, I mean, that's how we are. These things are making a difference. And to give people the flexibility where they only have to come into the workplace maybe a couple of days a week, so they could manage that for a couple of days and the rest of the time they're working remotely and they don't have that commute. They can put more time into working. They can put more time into their home lives. And that's a balance that they want.
Yeah.
I don't see this disappearing.
Certain, and again, I think it's and I think it depends on market conditions as well as, the industry as well.
Yes.
Certain industries are more, it could be more, integrated.
They lend themselves. Lend themselves more. I mean, let's be real. Tech certainly does, but even various other industries, accounting. I mean, up to a point, architecture. If you have a robust IT setup and you can set people up with CAD to work from home, they could do what they're doing wherever they are.
Right.
And
Sarah, want to talk a little bit about, because you kind of led with kind of the employee value proposition of employees working remotely. Talk a little bit about where HR and business meet. From your perspective.
From my perspective, I would be happier to see more people on, in the C-suite end of things, thinking a little bit more broadly about how HR fits in, because HR, from their perspective, I would guess probably is mainly about compliance and why do we have to pay people so much, and why do the benefits cost so much? And I'd like them to be thinking a little bit more about, okay, where do you want to take this business? Where do you want to see it in 5 years? Who are the people that are going to take you there? What is it going to take to find those people, to attract them to this business, and to keep them with us? And I'd like to see more forward thought, along those lines, instead of, oh, so-and-so is leaving, we have to go find a replacement. I'm like, okay, yes, we do, but we should be thinking about that person and then where we could go from there. I think there's too much reactive, not enough, proactive.
Okay. Talk a little bit about, in your career, kind of reflecting kind of impactful HR projects or initiatives you have take place, and why is that in your lockbox as something that you're proud of? It could be, present day or just kind of earlier in your career.
There's been various different weird, stupid things. I mean,
well, we're working with people, right?
Well, working with people, but also working with the business. So a long time ago, I mean, really a while, I had a law firm that was based on the left coast, on the West Coast. Okay. So they had some very firm ideas about how they thought some things should be handled, including things like billing, time entry, which is the lifeblood of a law firm, because that's how bills get paid. And it took some doing for me to persuade them that, yes, I understand, and this is how you think that it should be done, but I am pointing out to you that there's a more effective way to do this that leverages technology, that is going to be more efficient, that is also going to cost you less, because that was back in the days when dial-up was an actual thing, and having to connect to the West Coast for hours in order to transmit all of this billing information was becoming extremely expensive. And I said, divide and conquer. Let's do a locally loaded setup that will then transmit the data once it's all been pulled together, like massaged, like managed, put into the form it needs to be, and then transfers to you. Because the transfer of data that way is going to be a lot faster, a lot more efficient, and it's going to mean that we're using our employees' time more effectively than the amount of time they're all sitting here trying to be logged into your mainframe over phone lines, which is insane, which I didn't say to them because they wouldn't have taken it well. But ultimately, I mean, that was the solution. I mean, more recently, as stupid as this sounds, it took me 3 years to persuade my boss at the time that the company should move from the time and attendance that they were using, which was this very tiny independent program that was, and this is embarrassingly recently, using dial-up for the hand scanners that people were punching in and out on. And it took me 3 years to persuade that this was not a great idea, that this was not a good use of anybody's time, that this was taking much more time to handle time and attendance than it should, that this is a function that should be automated. There's software that does this efficiently. After 3 years, persuaded him, took a while, nearly a year to roll out because all kinds of people had to put an oar in the water and complain, or try and manage the process, but we got it done. Not too long before COVID hit. I have never been more grateful to have a feature like this, because it meant that we were able to pivot and say, okay, we're not going to do, fingertip readers and scanners and kiosk and all that stuff that we were planning to invest in. We're going to set this up so the employees can enter their hours on their own cell phones. Mm-hmm. So that they are not having to go and troop up and wait in line to go clock in and out, which I feel like is like, what are you doing here? And it meant that we could pay them accurately. We were getting real data that showed us exactly the hours that people worked, so that we weren't having to do estimated payrolls, which would have cost the company a fortune. We had real data, and it was more convenient and easier for the employees. And on top of it, it meant that we could roll out features for them like, hey, you can look at your pay stubs. You can print out copies. You can print out your W-2s. You could schedule your vacation using this software and this app, like things they did not have.
Okay, and certainly that impacts the employee experience.
Sure.
In a
It
positive
puts it in
way.
their hands. I mean, it means that,
Yes.
okay, stuff that they had to wait for days to get a request in, to get an approval back. And now it's like,
Got it. Just a couple of final questions, but I just think it's helpful for the audience. So you come from a benefits kind of
yeah.
background, and I think it's still the question's applicable. Just talk about, I guess, the skills you think are needed to be an effective HR professional and why.
I think if I'm talking soft skills, I would say you absolutely need to be a good listener. You need to find patience, develop some. I know some days are worse than others. But really, I think listening is huge. Be a happy reader, be a voracious reader, read a lot. And not only HR, because you'd be amazed the information that comes to you through things you would never have expected.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not kidding. Even science articles, you'd be surprised, things that could pop up, back on your screen later in some different form that you would not have expected.
Okay.
I mean, I'm reading a whole lot about long COVID now.
Absolutely. And just talk about, because your closing thoughts on kind of the future HR, what do you think, where do you think is going? You have AI, you have, a lot of, on the horizon, kind of just general thoughts.
I think AI is a useful tool, and I think that we should view it exactly that way. It's a tool. It's not coming for your job. Okay, but it's not the sole answer to everything either. We're going to have to learn how to work with it and learn what it does well, and what we can use it for. And there are things that it does well. I mean, I would say that there's dumb, like things you might like, job descriptions. Sometimes, yes. At least it has helped me get a start on things that are hard for me to write, like rejection letters. I struggle with these, and anything that could help me in that direction, even maybe working with it to develop mission statements. But I think it's a tool. For me, it's a jumping off point. It's not the end. It's like, here's where I start. Where do I see HR? I think HR is going to become more complicated as benefits questions become more complex, as requirements proliferate. There's more and more like federal and state, if not local, requirements for disclosure, for transparency, for reporting. I mean, we saw that with COVID. I mean, I don't know if you may realize what I'm talking about, where we had to come up with plans for the business, for how all kinds of aspects would be handled in the event of outbreak and whatever. These plans had to be available publicly. All kinds of things that we never, ever saw coming. And here they were. And I don't think that's just going to disappear either.
No, definitely benefits. One of my mentors told me benefits is something very personal. And so what one employee or one group of individuals may value, whether it's more time off, tuition reimbursement, another group may value pet insurance, kind of different types of health plans like high deductible, HDHP they call it, right? So
or HSAs. Because I had questions about that today. Somebody was asking, do we have a high deductible health plan? And I looked at him, I said, we have the opposite of a high deductible health plan. The employees, I mean, the union group has union. We have a small non-office, non-union group that has a fully funded standard plan. And then the office employees have a self-funded plan. So I've got 3 different things going. And this employee is in the self-funded. And I said, your deductible in network for this plan is 0. That is not a high deductible plan. That's the opposite of a high deductible.
But so Sarah, listen, this was very
Yeah.
helpful. To get to know a little bit more about you as we continue, to grow this HR community. And thank you for your time.
It's my pleasure.
Have a great night. Take care, all.
You too. Take